I heard she's about the dollars.
Respect.
All right, folks, we are live again on Pangburn. Welcome. Happy New Year. We are back. And we're back with the least controversial topic that we could possibly be talking about today. Sex versus gender. What is what? Why are they different? No, they're not different. We hear a lot of bitching about this topic online, and no one seems to want to do the historical research on how long science has delineated between sex and gender in the literature. So there's my 2 cents, but I'm gonna run away, go have a nap because I am a new father, and sleep. Sleep is a little short right now, but I'm gonna have a nap, but also be listening to the show. Don, take it away, man.
Well, hello everyone. Travis, what a wonderful opening to bring us into this fun, non-contentious topic of sex and gender. Recently, this has popped up again in the discussion community, and as appropriate, we are again going to be talking about it. So, there's a few things that I think are central to the controversy around sex and gender. I think the first one, I think that most people default to, is they'll talk about sports and fairness. It's usually the easiest one to try to talk about the biological part of sex and what that is. Another one would be this uneven. People tend to think it's a controversy, that there is this need from the community and from the academia to distort specific topics and distort specific language for whatever ends or means they want to talk about. That's usually on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, the conversation is usually around rights, medical treatment, recognition, and things of that sort. So I wanted to start the conversation today, I think, with a flipped conversation. We know Matt Walsh released his movie, What is a Woman? So I want to ask people here, what is a man? And let's start with asking that question. What do we think is a man, everyone?
Can I offer just like a very hacky biological opinion?
You can offer whatever is your opinion, because I want to hear what you have to say, Nate, not what you kind of want other people or how you want to run the conversation. Tell me what you think.
Sure. So playing into that, what I would say in that case, I don't think that gender or sex goes beyond hormones.
So you think that gender and sex don't go beyond hormones? There's nothing else that matters?
Nope. I think my opinion is there's a small percent difference in like the tasks that groups in a society will normally undertake, and a lot of that, I think that impact can be somewhat profound or pronounced. Pronounced is probably the better word. And so this is, Travis just had a kid. When I had my kid and stuff, relationships sort of change, this kind of stuff. So that's all I really wanted to say was,
if a woman who takes estrogen blockers and then the testosterone, are they a man now, in your opinion?
No, I mean, they can, I'm not going to say no or yes. They can tell me.
No,
right?
You have to, because you said that what makes a man is nothing past their hormone profile. Right? Am I understanding you correctly? Okay. Yeah, so I wonder if that hormone profile is artificially changed, they have artificially changed their sex and therefore their gender.
So what I would say is that whatever. I don't know anything about their biological characteristics in the individual level.
No, you do know. You do know. In this hypothetical, Nate. In this hypothetical.
From my opinion, what I would say is, like, if I split the screen in half and I said, and I wanted to talk about biology and hormones and just this sort of a somewhat of a skewed or normal distributions of stuff, I would say that, gender affirming care, something like that, pushes, the impact of that is pushing people towards that end of the spectrum that they're also comfortable with. I would say it elevates a lot of what I would describe as like a manly function. Like, that's what I think, but I could be wrong.
So
Okay.
you're agreeing that there is a social, you're also agreeing that there's a social implication of the gender role. Like you said, when you became a parent, the roles of gender were like more pronounced to you, right?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't talk about that yet, but
Well, I'm
But,
saying this because you said that there was a social aspect.
yeah, and I think that's actually a little more, I don't know. I think that's a little more complex as well, just because, yes, societies and people are the ones defining this, right? Kind of clinging around with pots and pans in a kitchen or something somewhere, like we've done with, basically everything, right?
Yeah, monkeys in the dark.
And so there's absolutely a social context. And I think if I just say a word like female or male, or I identify with my pronouns, there's already context to that is only partially referencing, how that conversation happens. I'm not like, what's her face? The girl that always, the doctor that always goes on Joe Rogan. Not that I watch her that closely, but like Dr. Wanda or something. I think she's been pretty strict in her opinion or her case or whatever about like, it's about reproductive capabilities, and that is because it goes down to the chromosome level, and so that's what we talk about in this case.
I have to cut you off. I have to cut you off because before I let Bucky go, CJ go, you started off with saying that you think that sex and gender don't go beyond hormones, but then as you continue to talk about it, you brought in a lot of things that had nothing to do with hormones. So I'm getting very confused here, right? It'd be the equivalent of me saying, the only thing that makes a boat is the fact it floats. And then when I ask you, okay, well, what if the boat is sinking? Is it still a boat? And you give me this whole other things that have nothing to do with floating. Don't go beyond hormones. So do you see why I'm a little bit confused? I'm trying to, do you still stand by your original statement that you think sex and gender have everything to do with hormone profile, or have you changed that? Because as you're talking, it seems that you've changed as you've been speaking.
Yeah, let me flip my camera back on. I didn't say it was everything. I just said that's where I was. That was my first opinion on that topic.
And then it evolved.
Did it evolve as we spoke? I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, that it doesn't matter if my daughter or someone else's daughter has a birthday party, and they're 3 or 4. Those kids, their brains, their development cycles, their education, all that stuff is basically 100% the same at that point. And I think as humans go through puberty, the effects of whether we just say testosterone or the aggregate response to the environment and growth hormones and all that stuff does have if you want to say drastic impact and make that not political, then that's probably true in the sense of autonomy, or not autonomy, whatever it's called, anatomy. That's how much I know about that. I guess is and then the other side, so I just don't think I said what you said.
Okay, CJ, put your hands up. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, CJ.
If it's quick, go ahead. I mean, it's not long, but.
Well, I just thought it was, there's not 100% the same in even a newborn. I mean, like everyone, we're not cookie cutters, factory made. We are like individually, gestate in a womb that has different, there's different circumstances in the womb for everybody. So,
I agree. That was actually going to be one of my main caveats for everything I'm about to say. Like when we talk about sex and gender, it seems like these things broadly, the vast majority of the time, 90 to 99% of the time, apply to some monolithic thing. But it's not monolithic, and there are exceptions. I would argue there are probably exceptions that prove the rule when it comes to sex, but gender is kind of like a thing that is more broad. So what I would say, a man and conversely a woman, when we're talking about the word sex, is just a chromosomal thing, a genetic thing that we use to predict certain health outcomes and whether or not someone's going to be on one side or the other of the making babies equation, or if they even can, if they're intersex. That's not always perfect, but in the imperfect areas, we still have a lot of study. When it comes to gender, gender is like a really social thing. It just so happens that humans are really good at dividing the man and woman line between male and female. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I don't know. But traditionally, it seems like men, traditionally, are the people that do labor, specifically physical labor, in society outside of the home, like on a almost macro level. Whereas women, it seems that in the past, it's changing now, which is why we're having this conversation, that women were still doing physical labor, but they're doing domestic micro level labor and also a lot of emotional labor. And I think what we're doing now is we're trying to get men to get involved more in the emotional labor and we've been introducing women into macro labor into society for a while now. So we're now trying to get men to get into the emotional labor and also to get okay with doing the domestic labor, which most men I know can do it. Like, nobody likes washing the dishes. Nobody likes doing laundry. But there shouldn't be a sex that is relegated to it. And I do see a lot of men online that don't know how to turn on a washing machine. Like, it's not a difficult thing. But also, we shouldn't be throwing all this stuff onto one gender and be like, oh, if you're a woman and you can't do this, or sorry, you're not a woman if you can't do this. It's even worse. Because people say, oh, if you're not doing dishes, you're not a woman. If you're not having a baby, you're not a woman. I think maybe the big issue we have is now we're starting to separate this man and woman thing that we had for so long from male and female. And the issue is like, we're like, oh shit, men can do these things too. Women can do these things too. So what do these words even mean? Like, I think they still have good meaning in general, but the issue is now we need to change what we mean by men and women because men can do dishes.
A little bit of language?
Women can be CEOs.
I think I agree. CJ's saying that a lot better than I did. Sorry for being adversarial off the bat, and Alex, sorry.
I would like to. I'm going to add a little bit of language to this. So there's not man things and woman things. That there is masculine ways of doing things and feminine ways of doing things. And so there's a masculine way of so we can talk about what these words mean, but I would say that there's a masculine way of performing certain activities and interacting with certain things and events, and more feminine ways that are like societal, we would say, feminine ways of interacting.
I'd say we're even moving away from that, right?
Okay.
I mean, sorry to interrupt, but I think we're moving away from that.
Okay.
I don't know
I
if
think those roles were enforced, though. They were forced upon us by mostly men, actually, that probably set up those kind of roles. And so that's not necessarily, we don't know that that's the natural.
Yeah, and there is,
because that's not true. That's very silly. Men have been in power in the world for a long time. That's true. But I'm going way back to 2017 Jordan Peterson talking points. It's not true that the reason why men and women like bifurcate into having different preferred like jobs and different preferred roles in society is a function of like top-down patriarchal force. That's not true.
Really?
Yes. The
Is that
study
entirely impossible?
Yeah.
Is it entirely impossible?
Well, I'm going to explain to you why I think it's almost certainly impossible.
I'd like to hear this.
Which is the fact that the more egalitarian a country gets, the more extreme the bifurcation between role types gets. So if you look at Nordic countries, which try very hard to be egalitarian, you see even higher concentrations of women in stereotypically feminine roles like nursing. The division gets bigger, not smaller.
Do you have a citation for that?
No, that's true. I can attest to that. I know that information. But is it as bifurcated as countries that have no women's rights, like certainly Iraq, Iran, and
your point, probably not. I'm pretty sure there's 100% participation rate in like Taliban-controlled countries, which is certainly higher than like whatever high participation rates in the Nordic countries. So like that's certainly true, but that takes a level of top-down systematic oppression that is not
I disagree.
Not like typical, I suppose.
And my only point here is to say that, yes, you're correct. But when we do these things that try to make it as egalitarian as possible, men and women do tend to go their own way. So it does show that men and women, or at least males and females, I should say, tend to bifurcate in some way because they are different. They're not perfectly the same, and they do have different aspirations. But I think it's a good thing that they're doing that. But also, when that's happening, it's kind of like a curve, right? It's I'm trying to say this very fast so I can stop talking. So at first,
bimodal distribution.
Well, kind of, yeah. Societal pressures are forcing women and men to be here, and then people get more free. It kind of comes down, and then it gets to here, and then once we get closer to true freedom, the distribution goes up a little bit. So they're kind of diverging, and then they come back closer the more freedom they get, and once they get to actually closer to true equality, they diverge again. I think it's just it's not a reputation.
1 second, CJ. Before we move on this point, I took the chance to fact check it. I used ChatGPT, give me some sources. And while this is true, we're talking about the gender equality paradox, or sometimes known as the Nordic paradox. This is true in Nordic countries, but this is not true across all gender-free countries with gender equality. In most countries, gender equality, what you see is that women tend to get a lot more technology, STEM and engineering, mathematics than non-gender equality country, even in Norway, as compared to nations without gender equality. And that this correlation isn't a causation, and even studies still disagree on it. So this is not just like a thing that's completely true, but it also just on top of that, it also doesn't mean it also means that historically there's also been technological reasons for why we had different gender roles between males and females.
And none of that is disputed by what I said about the forced gender roles. None of that. I mean, even if all of that was true, that does not debunk what I said.
Well, okay, so are you saying that they are forced, or are you saying that they are...
I mean, I'm a woman. I have a lived experience of this situation, and other women have. It's hard. It took forever to get women in positions of, look out, 2 times we've ran a competent woman for president, and 2 times she was beat by a moron.
Let me ask you something, and then I think we'll be able to understand each other. Are you saying that there would there be a significant sex-based disparity in social roles, even if there wasn't what you describe as like male enforcement?
Well, I'm not going. I'm not laying all of the blame on men. I'm not laying all of it. I think that accounts though for a lot of these roles that people say they pretend like a lot of the people will pretend like that these are natural roles that women and men went into because, God created us that way or whatever they say. And they're not necessarily natural roles. I mean, they go back for thousands of years in forced places. I mean, and it's not necessarily a conscious.
Yeah, washing dishes and doing laundry is not a natural role. I will agree. It's anybody who says that is a bad word.
Yeah, pressing button is not a gendered thing.
I quickly just want to point.
I'd be curious to hear. Sorry.
I want to just point out before we move on that we are trying to talk about gender and sex. So let's try to tie that in. And I also just want to point out that it wasn't until the 70s where women were allowed to own credit cards in the United States. So when we're talking about, that's the type of oppression that's usually patriarchal that we are speaking about. There was nothing technological. There was nothing unegalitarian that stopped women from owning credit cards. That was a purely patriarchal move.
That's what I don't get to Parker's point. Like that's been out throughout history. Women were didn't have positions of power, and
I want to talk to Dandan's position of what is a man.
But I wanted Casey to have her thought first.
Yes, first.
And then Alex will go with what is a man.
I mean, I was just going to throw out there, I would be curious to hear from Brett, because I've heard that it goes both ways. And I was just going to point out, like, for a lot of male teachers, when they try to work with kids, like they'll face discrimination. So yeah, it's like we have these subtle pressures onto people to go into certain fields when it's like we benefit from having these diverse, employed. Yeah, you get me.
Why suffrage?
I would agree.
If they were okay with everything.
Well, I think it kind of depends on the grade level. This is kind of off topic, but I feel like at the high school level or the college level, there's not a lot of suspicion for male teachers, or even at the middle school level. It's more like male kindergarten teachers that I think probably get more side eye. It's off topic, but I'm curious, would that be your experience, Benson?
No, they're begging for men to come into the schools because this hysteria that's been created over it is just that, hysteria.
Okay.
Like, honestly, you're going to have bad people in any kind of profession, admittedly, right? People that can get in positions of power and do things. But this whole hysteria, part of it too is just, as the age is younger, you have to do a lot more like very structured material. And earlier on, the reason why it was mainly women in K through 12 education was because of the pay. So early on in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, it literally was like, okay, well, women, you could go be a teacher. But what we're not going to tell you is that teachers have never been paid adequately with the given time period on, with affording other things. But what Casey said is what I agree with. You can have a person of any, in any given role. It's just, it's to me, I think, we really have to get past points about superstition or points of saying this is what a person of this sex or gender does do. To be like, okay, you know what? That's not opening human flourishing. There can be certain factors, like you said, John, about like people are gravitating towards given, different jobs. And that's okay. That's not, you don't have to force anyone to go into a given field. But just be aware that it used to be very illegal for women to be doctors or lawyers. And that's within our grandparents' lifetime. I'll stop there.
Yeah, and then you had the civil rights movement where the laws were passed for them to be able to not be discriminated against because of their sex.
Yeah,
Okay.
I will actually build off of that into what I was going to say is that just because we've never seen a person do a thing does not mean a person is incapable of doing that thing based off of gender or sex. And we will not know until we allow for a person to attempt a thing. There are studies specifically like about emotion there are studies relating to the differences in male versus female brains and how emotions are processed. One being laterally, from left brain to right brain, and the other being from occipital to frontal lobe for men. This is showing more of a difference of the female brain is able to have many emotions going simultaneously, whereas the male brain is able to have multiple emotions going at the same time, but they are far in a way more intense than the other one. This is contrary to the way that we have treated men over, depending on where you're standing, decades to millennia of saying men do not feel emotion, but what we are actually seeing is men shouldn't feel emotion, so they are trained out of feeling their emotions, their brains flipping the switch of emotion, and then when we see men not feeling emotion, but then becoming incredibly, profoundly angry, just saying that, oh, well, that's the only emotion that men do have is anger, but we do not foster men to have any of the, or present with any of the other emotions. That doesn't mean that they don't have sadness, joy, anxiety, any of the other emotions that a person can have. So there is a slight so both sexes are capable of having the same level and like energy devoted to emotional understanding, but one has more there's like nuance and acuity to the emotions, and the other one is more obtuse and extreme in its emotions.
Don, I imagine you want to get back to the gender sex thing, so I can say something on that if you like.
I'm just gonna want the conversation to flow and develop the cool ideas.
Yeah.
I got one. I feel like a lot of.
I would not have made it.
Well, how about this? Let me ask you this. Let me ask again. What is a man to you? When you think of what it means to be a man, if you are a man, if you are a woman, when you think of what a man is, I want to hear what you actually think it is. Like when Andrew Tate would say, "What is a man?" He'd be like, "So it's a alpha Chad, angry, working out, hand positioning, whatever." Right? I want to hear what do you believe a man is?
As a burgeoning, coming into his own man during that stage, specifically in masculinity, I have to say that a lot of it has felt like men are defining themselves in opposition to like women. We use more of an exclusive definition of masculinity and men as opposed to an inclusive one where we aren't defining what a man is, but more so what a man isn't by like disqualifying men for having this or that characteristics, especially if they fall more in line with feminine characteristics and like women broadly.
Well, how about yours? What is your idea of what a man is?
I mean, my like to give a more affirmative like kind of definition. I feel like the masculine attitude and the masculine like form is to like kind of act like action without almost not to generalize about it, but like action without consideration or like doing without justification. Like
action for action's sake type of situation.
Yeah. To be like in a more mystic sense, like I've heard it like men exist and women are, or to be a man is to exist and to be a woman is to justify existence. I think is something that I've heard, like action versus attitudes.
Okay.
But it's a difficult question. Like gender overall is
it is a difficult
complicated.
Question.
There's a lot of ways you can frame it in your head. I think a lot of it comes down to your relationship dynamics and like what you can kind of bring to a loving union, so to speak.
Okay, so like what you can bring to a loving union, action for action's sake. How about John? I know you wanted to talk about this. What do you think being a man means? Mr. Parker? Okay, how about Robin? What do you think? When you think of a man, what do you think of?
I think, well, the word man just brings to mind the males the men in my life, like my grandfather and my father. And so I think of man as someone who is responsible, is caring. I mean, I don't see a man who beats a woman as a man. To me, that's not a man. I define men like that. Like a man has to be somebody that takes responsibility for themselves and protective of their, but not in a strict way, not in a oppressive way. A man is not intimidated by me. If a guy is intimidated by me, he's not a man as far as I'm concerned.
Robin, would it be fair to say that like a man is someone who kind of vaguely but not strictly acts in this protector role for their family unit and those around them? Because I kind of feel like
protector role, just kind of a leader. I mean, my dad was the leader, but my mom was definitely like the boss. So
I mean, protective as in like a man wouldn't let somebody go and harm not just the women in their family, but any of the members of their family.
Exactly.
And certainly, I wouldn't say that somebody that harms their children, anyone in their family, the women in their family, would be a man either. Even if they're beating on their son, I feel like I would say that's, not manly thing to do. I would say it's a cowardly thing to do.
So I guess I'm defining men as something they're not too, because not a wife beater or a child beater, but I just, I just feel like that, and I felt like I'm a cis straight woman, but I still consider myself like I have been the man of my family. because I've been alone for so long. I've raised my children. I pay my own bills. I work in a male-dominated field, and I'm respected in that field too. I don't have any trouble with these people, and there's nothing but guys that I work with. There's no females that haul farm milk in Kentucky. I'm the only female. So, I'm the only woman does that. So in a way, I'm the man in my family.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, like, women, just because men are kind of protectors in one way doesn't mean that women aren't, right? Like, I think that men and women, this is kind of getting into ideals. So if I'm ever talking about what a woman is, what a man is, I'm talking about my personal ideal, so I'm not trying to force it on anyone else. But, like, a woman protects their family as well, just in a slightly different way. They're not as capable physically, but they are capable of, like, Actual Human was saying, of being able to complex emotions and thoughts and kind of guard people in a way of removing them from bad situations, or, talking to people in ways that males might not necessarily be good at. So it's not to say that men protect and women are the protected. No, women protect just as much as men, just in a slightly different way. But also, I've seen women beat the shit out of people that deserve it. So
I've just realized how miserable I would be if I had been forced into a traditional female role, women role. I'm not. That's not me. That does not fit me. I'm not trans or anything like that, but I am not comfortable in a traditional women's role of being home, washing dishes and cooking and cleaning and stuff like that. That's not me. I hunt. I do a lot of things that are typically men areas, and that's just because that's what I enjoy to do. And I don't feel like that I would be happy in that box, and I don't feel like that those boxes were provided to us by nature. So
exactly. Can I just say something?
Yeah, of course.
So, from what I've heard, it seems to me that there are the qualities that have been described, like the characteristics, can kind of go both ways. Those like masculine characteristics and feminine characteristics, they become like a little bit more interchangeably, more and more, that you can attribute what people would normally consider traditional masculine characteristics. Some women would have that. Some men would have traditional feminine characteristics. So those are that is on the, you can call it the subjective level. And I think from my perspective, to sort of from a holistic point, you might want to, I want to approach it from a subjective perspective, which is what I've already described. And then from an objective perspective, I think for you to be a man, for example, you might want to have, go to the biology of it. You want to go to the cells. You talk about testes, you talk about the cell, the cell of a male having I think it's the reproductive cell, having the X and Y chromosomes rather than the XX chromosome for females. So can we dissociate the biology from, if we were describing a man, does it have to include the biology? Because that's really an objective fact that's also tied to the subjective characteristics. So I would want to approach it from both ends. Yeah. So that's
I don't know if I can play off that a little bit with what I said originally about biology. I think there's a difference between having that conversation in the political context and then having it in the context of what can any biological person say? I'm 100% confident that if someone who was born with two X chromosomes wanted to have the same conversations as a man, and they wanted to have those conversations that are maybe about whatever aggression, impulsivity, about having androgenic responses to just ordinary environmental stimuli, they could do that, right? And I would imagine like WNBA players would outcompete me in a lot of those things if we were to have that conversation. But at the same time, I think if you say this in the social or political context, gender isn't arbitrary like you said it was. I think there are people who don't want to only be identified, and there's complete different conversation and validity in the trans ideology statement. But like if we talk about philosophy and ontology, I don't think it's as arbitrary as you're making it out to be.
First we need to recognize that the scientific community and the literature on this has separated the terms sex and gender from each other, and that they have put female and male as biologically sex terms, and a man and woman as gender terms. I mean, that's what's used in the medical community. That's what's used in the studies and it's been like that for over 20 some years at least in the textbooks. So
yeah, and
our textbooks for psychology started differentiating between male and female characteristics around the 50s.
And
man and woman. I'm talking about man, woman, male, female.
Robin, those also, sorry, not to interject, those also require some context to, if we're going to apply it in the social sense, like looking at things like HR policies or around laws at both the federal and the state level, looking at case law, stuff, looking at, how societies and why, they fund initiatives for, different segments of the population. All those things are relevant in that type of, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but in that type of conversation.
No, I understand. But I think that every policy should be based on evidence. And so any policy that we make needs to take in account the science behind these issues. That's and correct. Why these are becoming, these are people's rights and their lives that we are choosing to either improve or destroy with just a stroke of our pen, because we don't understand the issue.
That is exactly right, Robin. I agree. Sorry, I'm just trying to support. No,
you made a good point. I mean, it's just nobody wants to listen to the science on this, and I know I'm not a biologist, but I know several biologists, and every one of them swears up and down that Dawkins and Jerry Coyne and them are completely wrong. I have read several books on this. I've read Evolution's Rainbow, which was very dense for me, but I made it through it. And it explained a whole lot, and it makes a whole lot of sense. I mean, there's a variation in humanity almost on every topic issue about our bodies and our personalities and everything. And you've got a majority of people that lay in somewhere in the variations of either side of that. But there's an outlier on both sides always, and those people exist, and they're people, they're real people. They're not just statistics.
Before we move too far in, I just want to be transparent. And before we start this, anyone on YouTube is watching, like, subscribe. Come voice your opinion on the Discord. The link is in the chat. It's in the description. Join it. It should be fun. You can give us your opinion, tell us what you think. But the reason why I started the conversation as I started when I asked people what is a man is because in all the answers that I got, except for Nate's a little bit, and then he kind of switched a little bit, no one really said, oh, it's because they have testicles and their hormones. It was a bunch of other things. And these other answers that we got, this is where gender is different from sex. Sex, as academia and scientists today understand it, is your chromosomes and their phenotypical outcomes, how they present
and themselves. Your gametes.
And your gametes, which is usually the phenotypical outcomes of your chromosomes, because you could have XX or XY and have like intersex issues, but the general complements of those chromosomes is what they call sex. Gender, on the other hand, is the intersubjective, it's the social aspects of what we expect specific sexes to behave like. And I think that here is the real delineation. Here is the real difference between these two things. Is everybody on board? Is there a disagreement that there should be this delineation?
I think gender is more about how somebody presents themselves than how we expect them to be.
It's identity. It's a bit of, again, identity.
Yes.
It's a bit of, again, people who felt they've been born into the wrong body or relate more to, and you talk, there's, I agree with your statements about X and XY chromosomes, but your hormones, if we're going to go back to that conversation, also play a huge part of that. And you may have lower testosterone and a higher estrogen level as a man. You're not everybody's an alpha, quote unquote, male and Paul Bunyan and whatever. And then you also have the, we've talked about the social, what sort of social and environmental things that you're surrounded with that will affect that as well. So, what is a man? A man is, again, if we're talking biologically, it's the XY. If we're talking in an environmental and social identity, you can choose to identify as a man. You can choose to do, quote unquote, more masculine jobs or whatever. It's really complicated. The problem, the reason I think that there's a debate, again, you started off with, there's the question of the sports thing, right? And Neil deGrasse Tyson had a great answer on one of his podcasts or interviews where, the Olympic Committee and maybe the NCAA, they look at how long have people been on hormone blockers and or, at what point they started and all these kinds of things where, they still have, it's really weird. So that's one thing where, again, the right will always sort of fight against this idea. But you also have in the Oscars and the you have in Grammys, you have best male artist, best female artist. Who's going to argue against that? It doesn't matter. And so if somebody wants to identify as a male artist that was born with XX chromosomes, they identify, and that's just fine. So let them identify as that. And I see the debate, but I also don't think it's as huge an issue as a lot of people make it. Sorry, I'll stop ranting. If anybody has comments on it.
Let me just add that, exactly what Dan said. That's exactly what I was trying to say. So that delineation is very important. Also, I think there's also part of the argument that is linked to like the some practical aspects. Like I've heard this the usage of bathrooms, sports. Like the example you gave, Greg, was like an activity that doesn't require physical strength or something. But the case of a sports activity that requires, physical strength, of course, we know that because of the difference in the male and female biology, that it has it leads to differences in the physical strength. There are some exceptions. So the discussion around that is how do you solve that? And the idea of bathrooms, how do you solve it? So I think those are some of the practical examples. Yeah.
Before we move on a bit, one second, guys. I think we're moving off point a bit. I wanna really iron out the gender and sex distinction because even as old Greg was speaking, you use the term male and man interchangeably at certain points. And I think this is a lot where the confusion comes along. Where when we use the word man, at least according to the Yale School of Medicine, we're referring to gender, not to sex. And when you use the word male, you refer to sex, not to gender. And I wanna kind of, just before we move on to the practical applications and solutions for these problems, I want to make sure that we can start here. That way, moving forward, we don't consistently have linguistic and barriers to communicate with one another. Are people following me? Am I being heard, or are there disagreements about this?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, for the purpose of this conversation, I'm happy to use the words everyone can agree on. But I think your point that a lot of this controversy does come down from just linguistic semantic overload of people meaning different things by the same words. Man has been used interchangeably with the word male for like a really, really long time. The fact that the Yale School of Medicine wants to use it a different way now.
It's been 20 years.
20 years is not very long in the history of the English language. And also, most people don't know what the Yale School of Medicine thinks. And most people don't use the word man that way. So there's obviously going to be linguistic friction when you're trying to adjust definitions that way, non-organically. That doesn't make it wrong necessarily.
It is organically. It is organically. It's done organically through human cooperation, ideas, achievements, and dissemination. It's not like inorganic. This is the definition of organic.
Well,
that's like saying planting trees is inorganic. You know.
Like when I say,
I feel like we use language to portray our ideals, and the more concise we are with our language, the more articulate we can be about.
Yeah, I understand. It's more of a side point. When I say inorganically, all I'm trying to say is that, like, if you polled 10,000 Americans all over the country, I would be surprised if the majority understood man to mean something beyond just like biological man. But that's not really the point. I actually think the idea that gender, like which one, like are gender and sex different, is kind of a stupid question. I think that if you define gender as being the combination of individual temperament and personality and interest, along with social relations, I don't think anybody, including conservatives, would disagree with you that that exists. And then that's not a one-to-one match to biological sex. I think the actual
disagree.
I think the actual disagreement for almost everybody is not like, does social relations and temperaments exist that go outside of the stereotypical, masculine and feminine ideal. The question is, out of those three things, which is the most fundamental and how much do they influence each other? And which one should we give the most weight? And I think that's really the question. It's not so much are gender and sex different, it's which should be given more weight. Sex or, individual temperament and personality. I feel like that's really more the question.
Are you asking for directionality? Like a scientific directionality? Like what affects gender norms more? The idea of the idea of man and woman, or the biology of male and female, which one affects gender norms differently? I think the overwhelming evidence is that sex affects gender almost entirely. It is, that doesn't mean it's separate from, and I don't think that's even in contention. I don't know where you think that's why is that in contention? And I also, why did you bring that up into me just trying to make sure we have an agreement on terms?
Well, I did say we had agreement on terms. I just thought it'd be an interesting thing to say. I apologize if I was taking things off track. That's my bad. I'm sorry about that.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to know.
Yeah. It's more a disagreement on terms type of thing. If you want me to shut up and you had a direction, I'll shut up.
No, it's okay. So my direction is, before we move forward, I want to make sure that we can all agree that there is a conceptual distinction with gender and sex. That we can understand that, and then we can begin to start having this conversation about sports, conversation about bathroom, conversation about rights, conversation about whatever it is we want to talk about. But as long as we're able to understand the differences between sex, and that's the biology, and calling that male and female, and then gender and calling that man and woman. Like, for example, so people don't conflate that when someone says, "Oh, a trans woman," they're not talking about someone who biologically changed their sex, because you can't change your chromosomes. You can't do that. That's what they call transgender and not transsexual, right? I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. Before we move on, we build something constructive.
Actually, can I dig my heels in?
I agree.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. I have a couple of studies that I've looked at that basically like look at the distribution between like male and female categories of like sex distinction in a lot of I don't know what specifically like they're looking at for like here. Only 3% of all trait categories, sex differences in the amount of etiological influences. And I don't know what those categories are, but there are a few different studies that, like the summary of this one says, the view that the world's population can be separated into a clearly defined didactic unit of male and female is defunct. Not only clinical observations, but molecular biology has established that sexual identity is on a continuum with enormous potential for variance.
Yeah, we agree that I think that sex and gender are on spectrums. They're not. There's no dichotomy here. It's not a binary.
Well, within sex is what that's saying. Within sex, there's a variation too. Is what that study says right there. It didn't say anything about the gender, did it?
No, but I guess I would be trying to point out that the distinction between like gender differences and like self-conception of gender might actually have more of a correlation to sex than we think.
It's informed by sex.
If we go outside of the binary that a lot of science has like focused on, like
yes,
I think it mentioned in there like if a lot of the things that we have found to distinguish between sexes, like to distinguish between the male and female category, have come out of like we are putting the cart before the horse and like separating those categories out first and then doing our research. And then over the last 20 years, as we have taken a more like neutral kind of gender critical look at biology, like the science of biology, we are finding more like novel kind of categories and like not as many exact distinctions between the two as you might think, given the whole history of biological science.
Can I respond to Captain Kino there? Can I say something?
Yeah, you can always say something.
So I just wanted to chime in that I think that research is incredibly interesting. I haven't seen it, but like there's definitely a parity when we talk about, this is my dad coming out. This is me being a dad. This is dad talking now. When we talk about gender being a spectrum, the thing that is pronounced to me is if we look, like I can make a statement that I would stand behind 110%. I don't know that I need to do that, but saying something like, in any society, men and women or any gender or sex should be able to respond to any of the societal sort of stimuli. I can see job applications. I could I could enlist in the military. I could go work at a library. I could get an education, and they generally have the same outcomes. But the fact that we do see a spectrum of outcomes, like I just was commenting on the fact there's parity and juxtaposition between this idea of gender and sex being conceivable on a spectrum and what we see in society. Like that seems real to me, but
I mean, we do see spectrum because we know that it's non-dichotomous.
Yeah, I think I've come out of a lot of like gender abolitionist kind of ideas just because it is such an ever-present thing. Like you can't ignore it because it's a present thing in society, and it's worth looking at what is actually going on there as opposed to just like refuting it, which isn't what I'm trying to do.
Well, I don't think we are to abolish anything, but I think that we are to allow people, shouldn't force people to be our roles either.
It's eyes wide shut is what it is.
We do understand. We understand that gender is on a spectrum, right? I don't know if the research is actually saying that sex as well is on a spectrum. Is that what it's saying?
Well, I mean, there's XXXX, there's XXY, there's XX, there's 5X, 4X, 3X, XXY.
And
what sex are
XY
those
with
people?
androgen sensitivity. So whether we like it or not, it's not dichotomous, right? Just observing nature, we don't just see either males or either females. We're seeing that there's variations between those two, and that's what makes it non-dichotomous.
Can I say the other?
Like 20% of the population is born without a Y chromosome. Actually, not all males that you consider males have Y chromosomes.
That
is actually disappearing.
Okay. I mean, the other variations from XX and XY, are those variations like the variants, are they like pathologies or they are like normal, they occur normally?
Even if there are pathologies, I don't think...
It is pathology because
it doesn't matter, though. It doesn't matter, though.
If I look at a 60-year-old male hippocampus, if that is a category in medicine, a 60-year-old male hippocampus, that is at least about sex. If I do a different study and say that, how people identify has an impact on 60-year-old, XY male, quote unquote, male hippocampuses, then that itself is there is pathology to, the different ways we're using sex and gender in this case.
Yeah, even if it is pathological or it is considered an aberration, these are observable things. So as a scientist who's trying to model reality, I can't look at sex and go, oh, it's binary, it's either male or female, because there's existences where it's not. Just to model it, just to understand it conceptually, we have to take a step back and go, well, we can't force what we want it to be onto nature. Nature simply presents itself as in a way where sex is not binary. It's just how it is. This is how it is. Even if the variation is 0.001%, that outlier creates a situation which the best way to model reality must include those as a part of its conception of what sex is.
John, I have a question for you.
But hold on 1 second. Sex is not bimodal. Gender is not bimodal. But these things are modal in a way that there are specific points. It's not an infinitely variable spectrum between X, Y, X, X. And it's not an infinitely variable spectrum from man and woman. You can kind of argue it's a little bit more variable in gender. We can literally define it however we want. But with sex, it's multimodal. There's not just two, but there's also not an infinite number of sexes.
Why does it have to be infinite?
I'm just making the point that it's not.
If there's just three, then it's not binary.
Yeah, it's not bimodal, but it is multimodal. What I'm saying
the reason why it's called bimodal is because sex isn't just defined as chromosomes. It's chromosomes and their complements, like the way in which they affect biology. Not just the gametes, everything. Physicality, height, hair amount, and these things exist on a type of spectrum. So when they attempt to measure them, you end up getting a type of very, very steep bimodal distribution. That's why it's considered bimodal. That's it.
Yes.
Here's my favorite thing to say about it is nature
but I think
is
John
under no
wanted to say
obligation.
something.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question more than anything else. I'm curious. So you can describe it as a bimodal, like pseudo-spectrum, and I say pseudo-spectrum because what he said about it not being infinitely divisible is true and a good point that I hadn't thought of. But do you think that there's a difference between saying that sex is a spectrum as opposed to sex is a, what's the word? Not bimodal. What's the word? Dichotomous, but between saying
binary?
That binary, yeah, there's the word. Between saying that sex is a spectrum versus sex is binary with disordered exceptions. Like, does one of those model or exceptions brought on by disorders? Like, do one of those model reality better? Do you think, or do you think it's a pure preferential like linguistic choice of how you want to describe it?
I think it's imbuing our like oughts and shoulds onto what is.
I think spectrum is the same thing for the record.
You think oughts and is are the same thing?
No, I think that any word choice would infuse your values onto the description. I think calling it a spectrum or calling it a binary with exceptions, I think both of those in part are.
No, I'll tell you why. Because the initial one, the primary one, is simply taking all of the data and giving it a name that we already have existing, which is it's not binary. It seems to take a bimodal distribution. The other one, a binary with exceptions, creates the exception. Saying, well, it is an exception. There's an exception here, and we have to recognize it as different from whatever the norm is. And that norm is literally us creating a normative standard. As a good scientist, you don't do that. You simply say, this is what all the evidence put together looks like on a graph. It looks bimodal. That's it, and you move forward with it.
I'd have to look at the technical definition of bimodal, but fair enough. I appreciate the answer.
I sent a graph that just based off of one of the studies that I looked at, it could be criticized because it's like a twin study, but it's a very big sample size. And when it counted for like a ton of variables and stuff, it seems like based on the findings of the study, like 97% of like sexual characteristics that are affected by gender, your chromosomes, hormones, whatever, like 97% of those, the variation amongst male participants and female participants was pretty much equal. Like, not that you're just as likely, but within a range.
Captain Kino, not to cut you off, but that's just a single study.
I know.
We're not a very dimorphic species.
You can take away from a single study.
Yeah, we're generally not that much different than
more than anyone else provided.
It needs more context.
We're not a highly dimorphic species.
Nate, I think Captain is just saying something interesting, and it's not. I think cutting him off here wasn't necessarily helpful. And I think that as a species, we're not that much different. Males and females, we don't look that much different when you really look at it. Like, other than even some females got facial hair a little bit, but we generally look alike. We don't look that different from one another, which is why there's funny shorts of comedians dressing like women and tricking people when they bend over into a truck and you look at their ass, right? And guys look at that ass. But it's really just, because the differences are not that big. They're not really that big. And I think that's what Captain was saying. Am I right?
Yeah. So, like, of the characteristics that they measured, only 3%. I'm not an academic. It's difficult for me to break down some of this shit. But, like, of the things that they measured, only 3% were found to have, like, a novel, like, you found it more in the female participants or in the male participants. Like, there was only 3% variation between the two, and everything else was negligible. But that is just one study, and it might have some issues with it. Twin studies I know have.
Yeah, all studies have some issues with it. That's what makes them good studies. Yes, Brett, you're raising your hand.
Something that I put in the chat earlier that I'd just like to name for everybody is the humanization that I think is absolutely necessary with this conversation. I think we've been doing a good job so far, but to acknowledge that part of why this conversation is so relevant is because for much of history, women, whatever that word means, were not treated as equals. And in many parts of the world today, that still exists. Maybe not as much in our Western countries as other countries, but at a fundamental level, when people on one side of the spectrum will make the claim that these are absolutes and whatnot, what I see that do to part of the culture is it doesn't actually help us evolve and transcend the dehumanization of the past. It perpetuates it. And I'm not saying anyone's doing that here, and I don't want to, sideline the conversation to that. I just want to put out into our ether that has existed in the past, and it's been very like things of, self-harm and stereotypes that people would justify for, making other people subservient. And I think that we really have to name that, because if we're going to have the conversation about how this would progress, it has to be with more humanization than we've done in the past.
Yeah, that is a severe point. I think without the context of what it even means to say man or woman in the first place, it's like, well, look, we've been building that stuff for like hundreds of years, right? And so, it's just, my opinion or belief or philosophy about it is if we don't have distinctions and maturity in the conversation in the first place, then, kind of the thing that makes the most sense is like, well, look, let's, whatever it is, let's fucking, bring a demo crew to the whole, sorry, pardon my French, but let's bring a demo crew to that conversation. We don't need to have it in the first place.
I'd like to put my perspective out there and see what you guys think about it. I feel like the entire issue is almost a resistance to new information, that people are comfortable with a dichotomy because it's an easy choice one way or the other. But history, biology, chromosomes, and social cues all show us that there, like Don has said several times, there is no dichotomy here. And the resistance not only is harmful to those who are directly affected by it, it's also harmful to the families of those directly affected by it. And I would say that one's own view of their own mind should be the ultimate authority on, are you a man, are you a woman, are you neither? I would tell you I'm a man. And I don't feel like I have to qualify that. And when someone tells me that they are a woman, they should not have to qualify that, whether I think they fit the role that a woman should look like or act like or whatever. If they say so, it's so.
Based.
Awesome.
Well, do people agree with this here? Do people in the room agree with that statement? That
100%.
So long as someone identifies as a woman, that they don't have to prove anything else to me, or a man, I just take it as is.
No, that's kind of silly.
Okay.
100%.
So let's go ahead.
100%.
So John, go ahead and have a conversation. Let's Kahneman, John. Let's open it up.
Well,
I kind of agree with John here.
If we're using the word man and woman to refer to nothing but gender, that is like social relationships, temperament, personality, presentation, those sort of things. That's not all I want to know about a person. I would also like to know things about their sex. That's information to me that's valuable and useful, and it's been valuable and useful for human beings throughout all of history. So if we go live in a world where all of a sudden man and woman in conventional use for like everybody just refers to gender, which is not really the case right now with everybody, but it's becoming increasingly that way. And somebody tells me that they're a man or a woman, I'm going to want to know more information because that's relevant to me for various activities that we might do together. So I would certainly ask. Depending on what we're doing. If we're having nothing but like a one-off conversation, then, whatever. But like for any other type of relationship that's anything other than passing, I would probably ask, yeah.
Can I add on to that, John?
Do you think that's interesting?
One second.
Do you think it...
I just want to develop a back and forth. I want a back and forth develop. So Casey will answer, then CJ can answer.
Okay.
And then Don, let's let back and forth develop.
Yeah, sorry for the lag.
I guess I think it's interesting that you're pointing out if somebody's telling you something about themselves, you're like, okay, I'm going to have to get to know you depending on what activities we're going to do together because you don't know. Those are things that we just find out. Like that's how human interaction has gone for hundreds of thousands of years. Like we haven't actually known people's sex right away. That's why we started to develop this distinction, because we're like, oh, there's something going on here. We've made assumptions, and we're going to change our models to reflect what reality actually is.
Yeah, I kind of said something like that earlier, too. Like, it's changing, so that's why we're having this. But one thing I wanted to say is, like, if somebody tells me they identify as a man or a woman, like their gender... their pronouns, what they want to be called as, I'll call them whatever they want to be called, because for me, it costs me nothing, and all it is just a matter of respect. But there's the flip side to this where, like, if the biggest machoist person, like he's the most muscular person in the world, has all your masculine quantities, but, you know, he's engaged in domestic violence, and he's like a person that you would not consider having manly traits, I would think it's absolutely justified and reasonable to go up to that person and say, you're not a man. You're not acting like a man. And
the arrest report would still say that he was booked as a man.
I don't care. He wasn't acting like an idealistic man. Yes, it'll say male or man. It'll probably say male on his. I'm not saying that he doesn't have male genetics. I'm saying he's not acting like an idealistic man. He's acting.
Well, he's not
like
acting how you think a man should act.
Yes,
right?
That's why I'm saying idealistic.
Okay. And so, do you think that you get to tell people whether or not they are a specific gender identity based on your norms?
It's not a matter of when you come to gender identity, personal identification, right? Which is like, you know, please call me by he, her pronouns, or not he, her, what the fuck, he, him, or she, her pronouns. I can say, oh yeah, he's not a man, because I'm still affirming that he's going by the male personal identity. But I'm saying his social, the way that he behaves socially is not the social man that I think. So he might be a male, he might identify as a man, but he's not showing manly qualities, right? I think there's a distinction there. There's like a third secret thing here that we're kind of glossing over.
A secret third thing. That's great.
Well, I think, didn't we start the whole conversation with the secret third thing where it's like, what do you think a man is? Right. Yes. So I don't think we're glossing over it. I think that. So let's go ahead and talk. Let's see how this relates now to. Let's open the conversation into sports. What do we do in regarding to athletic competition? Do we use gender? Do we use sex? Do we use a combination of both? How do you want to go about it, and why do we think it's such a controversy right now?
Well, I think it's basically a question which is more relevant to the act of sports. What's more relevant? Is it how the players feel about themselves? Is it how they want to present and how they want to be treated? Or is there biological makeup, especially regarding children? Which one is more relevant? And that's basically the fight, as I see it. I think that's the proper way of thinking about it.
To go straight off of what the guy said before about like, oh, I can go to someone and say you can. How about that one boxer woman who was constantly misgendered and constantly told that she was not a woman? Like there was like a social movement to deny her womanhood and like take that from her, regardless of anything else.
Yeah, I think it was wrong for people to do that because I mean, even if she wasn't a woman, it would still be. But she is the woman. She's like biologically a woman. So I think that's the issue with that is that people were saying that she was. They weren't just saying, "Oh, you're not a woman." They're saying you're not a male, or sorry, they're saying you're not a female. You're actually a male, which is I think slightly different than me saying, "Oh, I'm recognizing that you're a female. You're just not behaving womanly, right?" And you could even. And I'm not saying it's a good thing that people say this, but you could say that engaging in combat sports in the first place is not womanly. But every female in combat sports is guilty of that. So to point that directly at one person, especially in the way that she was treated, wrong, horrible, don't like it.
I think that's just kind of Western influence on your idea of what is manly and what is womanly.
Yeah, it almost certainly is.
You know, the other cultures, there are women who run the place. There are matriarchal cultures across the world that are very successful. There are plenty of female sports. I don't understand the competitive nature of sports. I don't see the utility in it. It's just me. I don't have an interest in it. But
by the way, I don't want anyone to think that my ideal men needs to be their ideal, or that I'm impressed that I want anyone. I'll just say that personally, for me, I don't think you're acting like a man or a woman, but I would think it's especially grotesque if someone tried to use the government to enforce those roles onto people.
I'm not a psychiatrist or psychologist, give love for evil, but that transgender thing is they're lunatics.
They're what?
Well, that was a lot to say that they're lunatics. So
they are all lunatics.
Come on, Lawrence.
Possibly true, potentially.
No, not possibly or potentially true.
Well, it comes down to how you define the word lunatic, but
I think we're pretty much sure how
I have something more.
lunatic as insane.
I have something more content relevant to say though, on the boxing question. So if I were to agree that it's bad that there was the entire media firestorm about is this person a woman or not, let's posit for the sake of argument that I thought that was very bad, and I do think it was bad in some ways. I think the thing that would be even worse is the fact that like world class boxers were being unwilling to fight within the first round, or were feeling so in danger for their lives that they just refused. I mean, I think
no. One world class boxer, the Italian
relevant.
one, who has done this before in other fights.
Okay, well, I can talk about UFC and Fallon Fox, and I can talk about the person who got their skull kicked.
But don't. I just worry that I don't understand why you need the generality, John. You don't need the generality.
I'm giving examples, and I'm giving examples to illustrate the point that even if there is some sort of harm imparted by dividing, by not allowing people's gender identity to be the foremost factor in which sports leagues they're allowed into, even if there is some harm from that, you have to ask the question, all right, is the harm from that bigger than whatever harm comes about of letting biological males into biological female sports? It's like I said at the beginning, the question is which factor is more relevant when it comes to athletic competition, biology or, desired gender expression? Which one's more fundamentally relevant? Which one's more important?
So how about chess? Do we think chess should be segregated along sexes?
That's a really good question.
Gender?
That's a really good question. I'm agnostic on that one.
It should.
But
it absolutely should be segregated.
I have a strong opinion about that. And my strong opinion might not seem like it's a strong opinion, but I hope everyone in the chat can recognize that's what this is. I think if there's not access to completely open tournaments, and if there's, when we think about the context that makes sense in the chess ecosystem, then like that I think that's the only thing that matters, right? I don't know what comes after that.
I agree. I think one thing that a lot of people think is that we don't have to have a men's only category and a women's only. We can just have a open division and a secondary women's category. The reason the women's category isn't to marginalize women, it is to give them a space where they can compete among people that, it seems in the history, in the past, that men tend to be really good at things, and if you allow men to go into that space, they're just going to dominate it. So the reason we don't allow men in these places is to give women a more fair place to compete. But if they want to compete in the open division that is open for everyone, that should be allowed too. We shouldn't have men's football and women's football. We should have open and women's.
Is your claim, so just to clarify, because I'm going to fact check this real quick. Your claim is that women were not barred from participation historically.
Oh, I have no idea. They could have absolutely been barred from participation in chess. I'm saying, ideally, we should have open division and women's division, not men's and women's.
I
don't know.
I'm going to throw it out there because my understanding is that, the reason that women's divisions often formed in many different fields is because they were barred and they were just like, okay, well, we'll just make our own.
That's possible. And if that's the case, it's kind of sad. But there should, say, it should be open, and then there should also be a secondary women's division if women decide they want to compete amongst each other. It's up to them.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Why does it have to be men and women's? Why can't it just be performance based? If she's a good football player,
that's why I said it should be open. I agree. That's what an open division would be. It would be open to men, women, trans women.
Well, depending on the,
I think the risk of just having open chess tournaments without any qualifiers is if it is the case there's a difference between men and women play styles or outcomes in open tournaments, or and if you look at how those are interpreted, like you can go really deep into that. Then it's
I'm not saying there should be no qualifiers.
Open tournaments could fuel discrimination and discourage the chess ecosystem from expanding.
I'm not saying there should be no qualifiers. I'm just saying that gender should not be a qualifier in an open tournament.
How about sex?
Open tournament is for anyone. Okay, sorry. No gender or sex requirements.
Yeah.
Just an ELO entry or something. Whatever I don't play chess.
But I guess one point to all of these is we do have in our world or in the recent history, we have provided females with a very privileged, unique legal protection in sports and in parts of society. And depending on what the things we want to do, it would necessitate that we would need to remove all of those protection as well on equal grounds.
What do you mean protections? Like which protection for like female or women players?
For example, we have female boxing or female basket or football. That's like different things that females can go to, but men can't. They're barred to go to those things, while females can in many cases go to the male sports, because even though they're called male, they tend to in practice just be everyone else, because largely no one cares of the male sports, but all the attention are to protect the females' capacity to compete or have their own fair spaces outside of the male being male dominated.
I'm not following you. I'm sorry.
In a sense that if we would say, like if I could go to, or anyone here could go to a female tournament because, I want to, we would need to remove the protection that women have if I would be able to have that capacity.
Yeah, but what protection would a woman have in a unisex
it's up to the organizations
as opposed to a single unisex opposed to both sex tournament? I don't understand.
I'm thinking more if we're gonna be able to implement this in the future.
Yeah, but which protections? I'm trying to figure out which protections you're highlighting at, because is it protection from getting raped? Either way, you should be protected from that, or is it a protection?
No, it's more as they call keeping things fair, as we kind of arbitrarily define them as.
Yeah, so in chess, for example, do you think that there's something unfair in the competition between males, females?
I don't think there is, but there is a perceived understanding of unfairness. Hence why we have the female exclusive things they can do, and everyone else.
I'm pretty sure there is an evident disparity between male and female chess players. It was a long time ago I heard that.
Yeah, but the question is that the question is that there is a discrepancy between, I don't know, Russian chess players and chess players from Australia, for example. Right? That doesn't mean that there's something inherent
biological
about
women.
There's nothing inherent about Russian DNA that makes them better at chess than Australians, right? So
the reason we do this is because biological women are 50% of the population, and it seems to me the reason we do women's sports is because it might have been different in the past. They might have been discriminated in the past, and the only way they could get into sports was by making their own division. That's horrible. That's wrong. That should be fixed. But it seems the reason we have women's sports is so that people who are 50% of the population and seem to have a significant disadvantage in many of these areas are able to compete against each other in a more fair way and not lose all the time.
Go ahead, sorry.
That's not to say that all women are always going to lose again. But
yeah, so if you want to create an
I think it's
assuming. It's this assumption that's gone back for so long. We just assume, and that's why women had to make their own divisions, because we like that mindset leads into, oh, just protect them. Oh, don't even let them participate.
But
like,
I'm not against women. But I'm not against women participating in an open division. I'm just saying if women themselves want to make a division where only women compete, I feel like they should be able to do that. That's fine with me. But I also think they should never be barred from, the biggest sports. The biggest sports organizations should allow women. They should all.
One second. I think
open.
if there's a cash prize, and it's televised, it's a work situation, I don't think you should be able to gender discriminate.
I agree. However,
if you and your friends want to get together and have a book club, and in your book club you say we only want women, have fun. If you want to have your own women-only tournament, have fun. But that's not what's
here's my counter argument
exactly happening in this conversation.
But here's my counter argument. I don't think that I should be able to play in the I'm not very good at basketball. But I don't think that people from the NBA should be allowed to compete in the WNBA.
Okay, you're not a trans woman who has.
I don't think that cis men should be able to.
Okay, but that's what I'm saying, though.
Or not.
Trans women would be the ones that would be playing in the WNBA, not men from the WNBA, from the NBA. And so those women would have went through hormonal treatment.
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily against that, as long as the interested people in the WNBA are okay with it.
Okay, does anybody think? Does nobody realize that these organizations had all this worked out for like 20 years? Transgender people have played in the Olympics. They had all this worked out. It's only because the right decided that the public should get to decide what is going on with transgender issues that we're even having this conversation.
I agree. The only people that should be determining who can compete in privileged divisions are the people already competing in those divisions. No one else.
It should be the governing bodies of those sports.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And each governing body, and it should not be affected by public opinion by bigots. It should it should not be that way. The science shows that women, after they go through, if a trans woman, after she's went through 2 years of her hormonal therapy, she is actually got, most of the time, like a majority of them have less physical strength than a cis woman. So they don't actually, and depending on when they transition makes all the difference too, because if they transition pre-puberty, they never actually even get the bodily strength that the men supposedly have over them. That's why that people are choosing to transition or use puberty blockers to stop that pre-trans, so they don't transition, so they can transition before puberty, because it changes your body completely. But it can be reversed, and it is reversed with several years of hormones, which is something that all the governing bodies required before they let you participate in the sport.
So, Vixel, I someone told me that you want to chime in. Do you anything you want to say?
Sadly, I'm sick, so my voice is practically gone. I'm trying to give what I can in tech.
Okay, no problem. Okay.
I know that Casey, I hope I'm not coming off as bigoted or unreasonable. I'm trying to be. I'm not a perfect person. I would like to see if there's any input that you have, because I heard you commenting when I was, giving my input.
Casey?
No, I hear you clarifying and everything.
Okay. I just don't want to come off as I don't want to come off as I do think that there are certain times when I think that the biggest organizations in each sport should absolutely be open division, and anything other than that is kind of ridiculous. Now, when it comes to the Olympics, it's kind of should there be a women's division in the Olympics? I don't know. But I feel like if we don't have a women's division in the Olympics, it could like take 50% of the population and just be like, well, you know, or I guess
you know what I would love
98% of
to see
58% of the
is
population.
like we see these issues oftentimes. Like for me, like I appreciate within these conversations when it's also brought up and acknowledged that women's sports also aren't funded to the same capacity. So what Don was trying to suggest of like how, yeah, if there's cash prizes and stuff involved, then we should try to make that more equal. Because yeah, I have wondered like this assumption that women are going to be weaker or whatever. It's tough because we know that nature and nurture cannot be separated. So from the time you're born, if you're given those messages that you're going to be weaker and you don't get access to the same equipment and the same dietitians and coaches telling you, oh, well, the men can do that, but women, we don't want you to get hurt. Like, I know it's idealistic of me, but I would like to see us get to that point where we can compete based on just the merits on an equal playing field.
I think I see what's going. Like, hear me out on this. Okay, I would say that we shouldn't have women in any sports category, but I'm 100% okay with discriminating against men in some sports categories. Is that a crazy thing to say? I feel like that's super oxymoronic and backwards to say that, but I feel like it's reasonable at the same time.
Discriminate against men, you said?
I might have missed you. Yeah,
like to not allow men in certain areas, or I guess certain organizations. Because I don't think we should be discriminating against women, but I think it's okay to not allow men in the WNBA. And I'm not talking about trans women.
Yeah, but to go back part of the conversation, then what would you base this on?
Like, what is a man? Is that what you're asking?
Well, if you're saying, well, we should or ought to discriminate against men in, let's say in the thing you said, but I say like, hey, but I am a woman.
I would probably say that the WNBA can for itself decide what a man is to a reasonable extent, but it would probably be something like, is not, if you're XY chromosomes, you've at least gone through the 2 years of hormonal therapy, and that's it. It'd be just like a steroid drug screen, just for, hey, are you running over a certain level of test or something? I don't know what the tests are for determining if someone is equal to a woman.
I guess possibly a test to measure physical strength. I guess that might be.
But I feel like if we just do tests of physical strength, there are some women that can deadlift like 600 plus pounds, and they wouldn't be allowed to play in the WNBA. That wouldn't be fair to them.
I think that there are specific sports that we can look at specific biological trends and generally segregate based on sex. Some of those might be things like the UFC or specifically wrestling competition. Right? But I think in most sports, endurance sports, and things of that nature, I think there's really no point to the discrimination that we see. I think most of it is unnecessary. For example, chess, I think, is one that doesn't make any sense for there to be segregation. Archery, long shooting, things like that. I don't see the need for it. In sports where the physical differences do matter, of course, you can look at trans individuals, because who we're talking about, and evaluate on a case-by-case basis, as I think most institutions do. The Olympics already have regulations on it, as Robin said, and that model seems to work out fine. Okay.
Yeah.
What do we think about bathrooms? I think we're pretty much all in a type of agreement on sports.
Turn all bathrooms into family bathrooms. Get over it. Fucking people are too weird. It's a place where you pee and poo. Who gives a shit?
Women's bathrooms have stall doors. And I personally, we don't have any this women being attacked by trans women in the bathrooms. Give me some examples of that.
Well, it's also like,
I mean, show me where that's show me where that's a thing that happens.
That's illegal. It's illegal for a cis man to do that. It's a woman to do that. It's illegal already for someone to attack anyone, even in a bathroom or not. Like,
and there's nobody standing at the door checking to see if they're dressed like a woman to come in the bathroom. So there's
someone at the door just saying, like, show me your genitals.
Yeah, but there's nobody standing there that keeps a man from a cis man from walking in and attacking a female. What, the bathroom door? How does that protect her? So I mean, that's just if there's somebody that is a sexual predator, they're not going to be, they're not going to have to. Sexual predators don't go through the process of transitioning so they can molest women.
Well,
I mean, they just do it.
That's a good point, Robin, because you know who we don't bar from going into bathrooms? People who are arrested of sexual predator crimes. People who have committed DV. All these people are allowed to use bathrooms.
I mean, Trump probably would be allowed to use the bathroom where, So.
Yeah, he got off on the rapist one, but only on
he was adjudicated for sexual assault, though. He was found liable for that, and so.
Yeah, I don't want to go too off on this, but that was he was found adjudicated for because
sexual
assault. The rape charge was what do you call it when you can't charge someone anymore because the time has gone by?
Statute of limitations, and only in the United States would rape have statute of limitations.
Yeah, so
in a country that hates women
in that state. So the judge was like, "There's enough evidence for rape, but I can't charge you for it because the statute of limitations. So you're guilty of sexual assault or whatever the hell."
So yeah, he's still a sexual predator, and he's only in a country that hates women would they have a statute of limitations on rape.
I would rather my child be in the bathroom with a trans than Trump. And that it almost feels like a bad thing to say about trans people to even compare that situation to them. Like, what is a trans person going to do?
I don't think the issue is with the trans people. It's more of everyone else who will just use the system. So if you have Trump go into the next Miss
It's
America
not illegal.
pageant.
It's not illegal. I can go into a women's bathroom right now.
I've done it before. When the men's bathroom is full, I go to the women's bathroom.
Oh, well, I'm pretty sure everyone has gone into other gendered bathrooms when the line is too long or too full.
What is it called? The clothing and changing room? Like the lockers?
I don't know if that's illegal either.
Maybe not today. I think it was in the past. But if Trump goes in and he's like, if women are uncomfortable with him being there, he could just say, well, hey, I do actually identify as a woman, or well, I want to be here because, well, I want to. Like, what is your uncomfortable feelings have to do with my wishes to be in this room?
Well, and that's a business level thing, use. Right? That's what people were crying about Planet Fit. That's not it's a business level thing. If someone's in a bathroom that the business doesn't like it, they can trespass that person from being on the property. It's not illegal to be in a women's changing room. I don't think. Based on what? They can trespass whoever the hell they want. It doesn't matter what it's based on.
Well, can you just claim discrimination and stuff for that? Especially if it's based on nothing.
People claim discrimination all the time because you can kick out whoever. But it's not illegal is what I'm trying to say. It's not illegal for anyone to be in any bathroom. As far as I know.
Well, then it wouldn't be an issue then, I guess. At least legally.
I don't think it's an issue.
Does anybody think it's actually an issue for men to be in a woman's bathroom? We just move on to
vice versa.
If a woman thinks so, then yes, it would be an issue. Otherwise, no.
Only if she thinks so. Interesting.
Well, yeah, it is unironically a protection from men. Like, I don't think we're talking about women going into the men's bathroom being ooling them and being like very gropey. It tends to be like in the reverse. So it is a men being the issue for women, and they feel uncomfortable. Hence, the things we do.
So
it doesn't bother me. We have stall doors, so if it was a common thing that they could, I mean, it's just.
It is a feelings thing, just like how we tend to say, like, oh, women feel less secure in society, even though we know that men tend to be, well, actually exposed to more violence. They just don't seem to vocalize it more. So it's not commonly known. But the women do vocalize it more, and it becomes more believed as a fact.
So I did. I noticed some Danish universities doing, because I did study in Denmark. They're having this unisex bathroom. I don't know if they're doing the same thing in some universities in America. Yeah. So
yes, they have.
That is probably a solution.
Most of that have been for like decades here, but it's very different from the States. So. Like we have like in changing rooms. When you go to like swimming halls, you change together, and you're in mixed saunas, etc., etc. It's not a big issue here.
Mm-hmm. It seems like the bathroom issue in America could be solved by stalls that go all the way to the floor. Am I wrong?
Oh, can we talk about that? Why in Europe? Apparently, that's not really a thing.
That sounds like a ventilation problem to me, honestly. Like it traps all the stank in there.
I mean, like, why don't we could just put vents in the ground? Why do we have these gigantic doors that like a 300-pound man can crawl? Like, that's just weird. It's not even about someone crawling through. It's like, I don't want you looking at my shoes. Come on, that's weird.
You're worried about.
I've had so many little children do that shit, and it's oh my god.
Look, it's in case you run out of toilet paper, okay?
Yeah, there you go. That's right.
So weird.
So if you run out of toilet paper, you can be like, "Hey, can you buy some over here?"
But I do want to say in my town right now, there are restaurants that are opening up that it's just unisex bathrooms, and each one it's like a full stall, right? So it's like a door you walk into. Every single one is a full stall. It's like just one bathroom for all men and women.
Right? It seems like you would fix that issue, you know?
I just gotta grab some water. Everyone just keep the conversation going, and I'll be right back.
I think, like looking from outside, Americans are culturally, you're a bunch of prudes. And you need to just, become a little bit more, loose.
You're not wrong, man.
What do you mean?
Settled by Quakers. What do you expect?
When you say prudes, what do you mean? Do you mean like there's not like artwork hanging up on the walls or something?
No, like everything's like so overly sexualized that everything becomes like a moral panic. Even though it's nothing sexual at all about it.
Yeah, no, I agree.
It's weird.
We were
like
founded by a country of like ultra like conservative Protestants, right? It's a
we have an
holdover.
obsession. Yeah.
I know. Yeah, it's a holdover from times past, assuredly.
I mean, it's like why the highest rate of porn viewership is.
Like if you're in Italy, you can walk in the Milan or Rome with your shirt off, like during summer, like you would get a fine for that. So like we have, but that's just not decent, I guess. But
I mean, I disagree as well with like guys like Andrew Tate said it's like the mommification or the feminization of the United States. I don't believe that's what that was.
No, you've always had this issue.
No, I don't agree with anything Andrew Tate says.
No, absolutely not.
I mean, we are the country that had a panic about witches and started burning innocent women at stake and throwing them in the fucking, river. If they sink, they weren't a witch. If they float, they're a witch, and we got to kill them anyways.
Yeah, I mean, I think superstition goes hand in hand with it's is it empirical inquiry that sort of houses the sciences, or I don't know if I said that word right, but whatever it is. I think empiricism is, or empirical inquiry is how the scientific method formulates types of observations they can make, and if that's not present, how is something true then?
Because the pastor told you so.
Yeah. I mean that one is, yeah. I think saying we can be au revoir, and kind of have these sort of fake linguistic and in a Hegelian sense context clues for what culture really is, but and I guess that's drifting someplace else. But when we think about an aesthetic epistemology or metaphysics, and how that can or needs to work also with observable reality, then what happens after that, I don't know, where does culture actually come from, bro? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it probably comes from a lot of places. It's a confluence of multiple different influences. What to say about that? Going back to the bathroom thing though, I wanted somebody to bring up Buck Angel. Does your wife, does your daughter, is that what you want to see? Does that make you comfortable to see Buck Angel in a women's bathroom?
Who's Buck Angel?
I'm gonna post a picture right now.
I think I would first echo what Robin.
Buck Angel is a biological female who's trans. So do you want Buck Angel in a bathroom with your wife, your daughter? Are they going to feel comfortable in that situation? Because it came down to would you feel comfortable in this? So to me, it always seems like the problem that people have is it's male to female transition. Trans people that they're no, we can't have them in the bathroom. But this person,
Scott.
I see. Scott, you're saying this person is a female, so they might be using the women's bathroom. So this person's a female. My daughter's in the bathroom with that person. I don't really. I mean, personally, I don't really give a shit.
Exactly. I know you don't. I was talking to the people who are saying who are going the other direction, right? They're saying, no, you can't have somebody use the bathroom of the gender they identify with because it's going to make people feel uncomfortable. I point out somebody like this, which will obviously make women feel uncomfortable, and they just. This is never the point of topic. It's always somebody who is male to female transitioning that doesn't pull it off really well, right? So if like a Thai lady boy or whatnot was in a female bathroom, nobody would fucking say a thing because they look like a woman. So what it really comes down to is people have a huge issue with somebody who's transitioning, but they just don't look enough of the way.
But Scott, where that's what I want to know is where in society has that issue actually come up in a meaningful or tangible way?
That's what I would ask people who are scared of trans women being in women's bathrooms.
Yeah. Exactly.
Good point.
I think that's right.
Yeah. No, Nate. I think I'm agreeing with your position, unless you're saying that people shouldn't be able to use the bathroom that they associate with, right? Because that's the position that I was making, and I was pointing out that the people who push back are only doing so because of one specific reason, is that the people that they're pushing back on are like Amon Khalif, who they don't look female enough. So all of a sudden, they're not a woman, right? Like it's fucking insanity.
Yeah, I mean, my point would be is if this was me, like, and just to turn my camera on, I don't know if you guys can see me, but I've got a pretty big beard. I've got a really thick brow. I can I'm like, if I'm being my most authentic self, I'm a really nice guy. I prefer probably like only to talk to people I know, or if you talk to me politely and nicely, I appreciate that. But I know what I look like as well. I know what I can sound like. And so like, I think like just the way I would take that scenario, if I was trans and I was trying to like describe what the future might look like or something, or, you know, just how I navigate that personally, like I'd have to put myself in the context of being myself first. Thank you. Everyone's saying I look beautiful in the Discord chat. I appreciate that.
You're a good looking man,
I'm a
mate.
casual regular
like you're
here, so
method
you
in
guys
the
get to see
woods.
some of this mug.
Here is another one. Let's do this. So this person going into the men's bathroom. What do you think about that?
For those who don't know, it's a can see in the chat. It's a picture of what appears to be a beautiful woman in a like nice gown, black gown with earrings.
I think the issue is you can take that and a million other examples to a male issue, and most people say we don't care, or no one cares really, or it's not really an issue.
Exactly. And so what is the issue? It's the issue is people who don't present the way that fits traditional social norms of manliness or femininity, masculinity or femininity, right? So if a trans woman isn't nearly as this attractive, that's where the problem lies. Period. End of story.
Yes.
I
think if the conversation is just like one person only giving other people their gross shit, like if I was trans and and this is starting on the side of the folks who are more disenfranchised, but if I was a scumbag trans person and I said, because I feel this way, you guys have to do everything this way, that's a scumbag thing to do. That's just a scumbag. And alternatively, I think like if I am cisgendered, and I say, well, I got, I'll do this voice, I got my family and I got all this other stuff I got going on here. And, I can tell you there's a lot of things I care about in this world, but nothing more than my daughter's safety. And then I tell you that you have to now hold on to my politicization and internalization of this concept. That's also an equally scumbag thing to do.
Yes. Thank you. Yes.
So let's narrow down. Let's start with a time of closing it, and it's like closing the idea. So where does this big issue with trans people come from? Because even people who disagree here in the chat about specific notions of sex and gender seem to be like it doesn't really matter. So where does this come from? Why is this so central to our political debate?
Because the right decided to use these people as a wedge issue.
Yes.
Yeah, because they lost the gay marriage. They lost the gay marriage fight, and so they went on to trans people because that's what they've always done. They've always used a wedge issue to divide people. They've convinced millions of Americans that they have problems in their life because some transgender person exists, which is just absolute nonsense. But it takes away from the fact that their life is hard because of mostly the things that bunch has done.
I think the issue is the left. You're just bad at selling shit, and if you want to, when you have bad ideas, you for some reason try to defend them all instead of saying, well, yeah, this sounds bad or this looks bad. Like, you don't need to agree with all things.
So which bad idea do you think the left is holding on to?
I would say, for example, this notion that, well, if you identify as Y or X, that is good enough for me, and it should be for everyone. When I don't think we have this idea for anything else in society. Like, if I would say I am a nerd, well, to be a nerd, I would need to qualify some sort. If I am a Marvel fan, well, I need to qualify in some sense. If I'm an American, well, do I have an American passport? Blah, 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 blah. But if you say, well, I'm female because I say so.
Well, not
no, they don't say they're female.
I'm a woman because I say so.
Or a
right?
woman. Yeah, but it's the same thing. Like, well, if you want to be a woman, you need to do something to qualify for that. Otherwise, it doesn't really mean anything.
There's distinctions here, right? There's identity. This is kind of like the thing I brought up earlier. You can identify as whatever you want, and like pronouns is a personal identity thing, and you should respect people's personal identity. Now, someone's personal identity might not match their, but at the same time, like, there's certain things that we shouldn't like limit people on because they don't fit a social norm, such as going to the bathroom. It's like such a weird, limited thing, especially when people deny the identity deny the identity women can still go in the women's bathroom, either like a parent going into the women's bathroom with their daughter and just standing by the door to wait for their kid to go to the bathroom because they feel the need to protect them or be in the bathroom with them, or just because the kid won't go to the bathroom without them. Like, we do this thing with people that deny the gender to go into that bathroom. Yet people are like, oh, well, someone who is affirming that gender, it might not necessarily match, it can't go in. It's a ridiculous premise. Because people who deny personally and socially the gender to go in that bathroom can still go in there. We're saying, oh, you look different, so you're not allowed to go in there. It's weird. I don't like it. And it's obvious that there's some...
No, it's not the left. It's not the left, because in the United States, the only time like any of this transgender bathroom stuff even came up is once the right started trying to push laws to say, no, you have to use the bathroom based on your birth sex, right? So what does this even constitute if you pass a law that does that? Do we now have some sort of police officers standing at each bathroom door inspecting people's genitals, doing a genetic test, and like okay, this person has XX or XY, so this is the bathroom you can go into. It's bonkers.
I mean, should we make it illegal for a father to bathroom with their daughter because the daughter doesn't like going pee or poo without their dad?
Dude,
it's so ridiculous.
When my daughter was young, I took her into the bathroom constantly, and there was never any issue, ever.
Yeah.
Well, what I hear from No Brainer EU, is that you're saying that the argument the left was making was bad. That's the left's fault because they were holding on to this woman-man transgender thing. I actually think that the topic is just difficult to communicate. And the Democrats and the left in the state is just generally bad at communicating to the average American.
Correct.
I don't think the argument is bad. It's actually quite sound, and it's backed up by tons of academic literature. I think the left just bad at talking to the general, to the median American. And there, I think this is where we both disagree and agree.
Well, think about this. Trump spent $120 million in the election running anti-trans ads constantly during every football game, during everything that was going on, every sports. Okay, so I mean, they don't. Those voters don't care what the message is. The message they want to hear is, here's who you need to hate because this is why your life is bad.
Yes.
Fuck.
I would almost go back to what Dundon said. The issue is not it being scientifically sound, but the issue is when the right have tried to push something, the left is so incapable of defending it in a good way, they tend to come off very
that's
insane.
Not correct.
So I kind of want to agree with him. So I think part of the issue is the right is doing something stupid and I'd say downright retarded. And the left is responding, trying to make a reasoned argument against it. But instead of just giving the good arguments that everyone in here is giving, they're going, oh, well, it's kind of like someone says 2 + 2 = 5. And you respond, no, 2 + 2 doesn't equal 5, it equals. And the reason is because God told me so. You're correct, your conclusion is correct, but your path there is wrong. And I think what the American left does a lot is they choose a shitty way of getting to their conclusion. I think their conclusion is right a lot of the time. They just have a really shitty way of arguing it. And sometimes they get dragged into stupid arguments by the right, and it makes the left sound even dumber. But
you guys are being pushovers right now. Not that that's the way I'd want to have that conversation, but you guys aren't accurately reflecting American history. So I'm just going to go on mute for that. Thanks.
I'm talking about contemporary. I don't know about.
What is going on, Nate? You can't just like pop out and be like, "Oh, you guys are being dumb about that," but I'm not going to talk about that. And explain yourself. What do you mean? Explain yourself.
No, it's only in the last couple years that we forgot labor regulation and labor unions are the correct answer. We forgot that having more public discourse about the environment and about technology is a winner in the United States. We forgot that things like inflation and having capital supply require some coordination and sort of reciprocity. We forgot all these things. These are all values of the left as well. And so saying that Donald Trump won the election and there's a bunch of bigots and hateful, spiteful, small, tiny people who try and make others otherized and non-people. There's people that are emotional instead of speaking truthfully. They can't contain themselves. They can't stay within themselves and have this type of debate. And so saying the left can't defend themselves, that's totally inaccurate.
Well, they're really bad at it.
Bias.
They're criminally bad at it.
I think that it's very difficult to communicate these type of topics to the general population through sound bites, quick words, advertisements. These are not easy things to communicate to the population. Look at how long it took the public to understand evolution. Look at the Scopes trials in the South, where it was illegal to teach evolution. And we see similar things today happening with DeSantis' reign in Florida and other areas around the country where they're banning the teaching of specific sex-gender distinction. The population can't understand that.
Our population isn't 100% on evolution. I live in Kentucky. We have an ark. Remember? We have a magic zoo boat replica. So, nobody hardly in Kentucky accepts evolution. We don't come from monkeys. That's what they say.
That's a failure of our educational system.
Brett has
I just want to say
what Brett has to say.
I just want to say real quick, the reason I don't like the left is they seem to have a lot of the same as I do, but they seem to come to those conclusions with horrible reasoning. And I'm not going to defend someone with horrible reasoning. So that's the reason why I decry them, even if they have the same conclusions as me. Go ahead, Brett.
Horrible reasoning is not given to one political party or the other. And the people switching parties over the last couple of decades between Republican and Democrat, I think you just need to stop with that. It's like the general public has been very upset for a while because one of the reasons wages have not kept pace. That's just a fact, an economic fact, and people are responding to that. But this kind of, I think, has gotten off topic a little bit. I don't know.
Can you kind of explain what maybe you think you're at the impact of wages not keeping economic pace? Like what can someone read or take away from that in a political or whatever context?
Trav, do you want to go? You look excited.
No, I was wondering what Nate said had anything to do with what was being said here. Sorry, Nate. I just don't think that's the topic at all. First, I loved the conversation today. I listened to the whole thing. I did say I was going to get some sleep, some baby rest, but didn't happen. But I listened to the whole thing. I thought it was fantastic. I thought everyone maintained a good faith, helpful nature. I want to give a special shout out to Robin. Robin, I thought you had some excellent points today, and you really shone as one of the great speakers in the room today. I just wanted to outline that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I know you're usually driving a big truck while you do this, so you are at somewhat of a disadvantage.
I've only run a couple of red lights.
Yeah. Everyone on YouTube, please make sure you drop a like on the stream and subscribe. And everyone in the room here, let's say a special thanks to Don for running the room today. Hell yeah, Don, the Don of Pangburn.
Thank you, Don.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, Don's got his.
You just got copyright strike.
Yeah, for the copyright, you're right. That might screw. Actually, that's a short enough clip where it won't mess with me. But
yeah, I'm just joking.
Yeah, Don, thank you so much. I thought it was great. Everyone, please feel free to move down into our off-air voice channels. We can keep the conversation going there. Everyone on YouTube, please join us on Discord. Everyone's welcome. As you can tell from this discussion, there are a lot of competing ideas here at Pangburn, but we just try to foster a good faith, helpful battlefield for those ideas to play out and wrestle with each other. But after it's all said and done, everyone's almost always able to remain friendly here. So consider joining the Pangburn Discord server. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure you go over and subscribe to Don Prager's YouTube channel, which is one of the many Pangburn Universe YouTube channels that we have that are branches of this main channel. And yeah, everyone
fuck those people.
Yeah, fuck those people. Yeah. We also have some sound bites of Don on here that are very helpful.
Yes.
All right. Thanks everyone. We'll catch you on the next live stream.
Peace out.